The sun spilled through the cracks of an old wooden shack on the edge of a small Ghanaian village. The air smelled of sawdust, smoke, and sweat, the familiar scent of dreams taking shape. Inside, Kweku, a young man with strong hands and hopeful eyes, bent over a half-finished wooden carving. His chisel moved with precision, each stroke breathing life into the block of mahogany before him. To anyone watching, it was just a sculpture. To Kweku, it was a doorway, his escape from a life of hunger and dust. His mother's soft humming drifted from the kitchen nearby. She was grinding cassava, her voice weary yet warm. His younger sister, Amma, played outside, laughing as she chased a paper ball through the dirt. Kweku looked up for a moment, his eyes catching the fading thatch roof, the cracked clay walls, the tired hands of his mother. He whispered under his breath, "One day, we won't live like this. One day, they'll know my name." He pressed the chisel harder, almost too hard, as if carving his future into the wood itself. Scene 2. The words of the elders. That evening, a group of village elders stopped by his workshop. They watched in silence as he worked, their eyes filled with something between admiration and concern. The eldest, Nana Kofi, finally spoke. "Your hands are blessed, Kweku. The ancestors guide your art. Remember, this gift is not for gold, but for honor." Kweku smiled politely but kept carving. "Honor doesn't buy food, Nana," he said softly. "My gift is all I have. If it can bring money, then maybe that's what the ancestors wanted." The elders exchanged worried glances. One of them murmured, "When a man stops listening to the spirits, he begins to carve his own downfall." But Kweku barely heard. His heart was already far ahead, dreaming of city lights, crowds cheering his name, and golden coins glittering like stars. Scene 3. The Night Visitor. Later that night, as the moon hung low and the village slept, Kweku stayed awake, sketching ideas for his next masterpiece. The oil lamp flickered, its weak flame dancing across the room. A sudden knock echoed through the door. Once, twice. Slow, deliberate. Kweku frowned. No one visited this late. When he opened the door, a tall man stood outside, dressed in a clean black coat, his eyes sharp and knowing. His smile was calm, but it didn't reach his eyes. "You must be Kweku," the man said. "I've heard of your carvings. People say they breathe." Kweku wiped his hands nervously. "I sell them at the market. Nothing special." "Oh, but they are," the man replied, stepping inside. "Your art has power. And power, my boy, can make you rich." The stranger's name was Mosi, a merchant, or so he claimed. His voice was smooth, like oil on glass. He spoke of exhibitions in Accra, collectors in Lagos, and buyers who would pay more for one sculpture than Kweku had earned in his lifetime. Kweku's heart raced. "And what would I have to give you in return?" Mosi smiled, slowly. "Not much, just a promise. Your soul's spark, the thing that fuels your dreams. You won't miss it. I'll make sure you have everything else." Kweku hesitated. The words felt strange, heavy, but the thought of gold, comfort, and success drowned out every doubt. He laughed nervously. "If it means I can finally take care of my family, then why not?" Mosi handed him a small gold coin, engraved with strange markings. "Then it's done," he said softly. "From this day, the world will know your name." As quickly as he came, the merchant disappeared into the darkness. The sound of his footsteps faded, leaving behind an unnatural silence. Kweku turned the coin in his hand. It shimmered faintly under the lamplight, beautiful, hypnotic. He smiled, whispering to himself, "My time has come." But outside, the wind rose sharply, whispering through the trees like voices warning him in a language he couldn't understand. Scene 4. The first sign that night. Kweku dreamed. He was in a vast golden hall, filled with statues, all carved faces looking exactly like him. Each statue whispered in unison, "You gave it away." He woke up drenched in sweat, gasping for air. The gold coin gleamed beside him on the table. He brushed off the dream, shaking his head. "Just nerves," he said aloud. "Tomorrow will be a new beginning." He didn't notice the faint mark now glowing faintly on his wrist, the shape of the same strange symbol from the coin. The morning after his deal with Mosi, Kweku woke to the sound of knocking. But this time, it was real. When he opened the door, 3 men in fine suits stood outside. Their car gleamed in the sunlight, an alien sight in the dusty village. "We're from the Ghanaian Art Council," one said, smiling. "We've heard of your work, Mr. Kweku. We'd like to buy every piece you have and commission more." Kweku blinked, stunned. "Every piece?" "At triple your market price," the man replied casually. By the end of that week, Kweku's small workshop was empty. Money poured in faster than he could count. Within a month, his name appeared in newspapers. The sculptor who brought wood to life. He moved his family to the city. The house was huge, with shining marble floors and golden handles that caught the morning light. His mother stared at the space around her, tears in her eyes. "You've done well, my son," she whispered. "But remember, not all that shines is pure." Kweku smiled, brushing off her words. "Don't worry, Mama. We're finally free." He believed it. Or tried to. Scene 2. The sweet taste of fame Kweku's new life sparkled. He attended art galas, interviews, and exhibitions. Crowds whispered his name like a prayer. Collectors fought over his sculptures, and critics called him a living legend. At one grand opening, a wealthy investor handed him a golden watch and said, "Time itself bows to men like you." Kweku laughed. The words fed his pride like fire feeds a flame. But beneath the applause, he felt empty. At night, when he tried to carve, his hands felt heavy. The wood resisted him. The smooth rhythm he once had, the connection between heart and hand, was gone. He began hiring assistants to carve under his supervision. They followed his sketches, mimicking his old style, but the soul was missing. The carvings were flawless, perfect, polished, but they no longer breathed. Scene 3. The whispers of the lost each morning. Kweku woke feeling drained, his eyes bloodshot. He often found wood shavings on his bed, though he hadn't carved in weeks. He ignored it at first, told himself it was stress. Success had a price, after all. But his mother started noticing things. "You don't sleep like you used to," she told him. "You talk in your dreams, like you're working." He laughed it off. "Maybe I'm sculpting my next masterpiece, even in my sleep." She didn't laugh. "You smell different, Kweku, like smoke and metal, like someone who's walked through another world." Her words made him uneasy. That night, when he looked at his reflection, he thought he saw something move behind him. A shadow too tall, too still. When he turned around, there was nothing there. Scene 4. The merchant returns weeks passed. His fame grew, but his art lost its warmth. Critics began whispering, his early works had soul, but now it's all gold and no heart. Then, one Evening, as the city lights flickered through his mansion's windows, Kweku felt the air grow cold. He turned, and there stood Mosey. The merchant looked unchanged, his coat spotless, his eyes gleaming like polished coins. "You've done well," Mosey said softly, glancing at the room filled with golden sculptures. "You have everything you asked for." Kweku stiffened. "Yes, everything." "Then why do you look so tired?" Mosey asked, tilting his head. Kweku didn't answer. He couldn't. His chest felt heavy. Mosey walked to one of the sculptures, a woman's figure with hollow eyes, and ran a finger over it. Beautiful, but empty. "Do you feel it too? The silence in them?" Kweku's throat went dry. "Gold shines brightest in darkness," Mosey whispered, smiling. "Enjoy it while you can." Before Kweku could speak, Mosey was gone, vanished into thin air, leaving only a faint scent of burning wood. Scene 5. The cracks in the gold time passed. Kweku bought more, built more, collected more. Yet, each new treasure only deepened his restlessness. He tried to return to his old village once, hoping to find peace. But when he walked through the market, the elders turned away. Nana Kofi muttered under his breath, "The boy who carved for the spirits now carves for shadows." Even Amma, his little sister, seemed distant. She pointed at one of his new sculptures and said quietly, "It's beautiful, but it looks dead." That word, dead, stayed in his mind. That night, he couldn't sleep. He tossed and turned, hearing faint sounds of chiseling from somewhere in the mansion. When he followed the noise, he found one of his sculptures glowing faintly, its eyes watching him. His heart pounded. He stepped back. But as he did, he noticed his hands, trembling, stained with wood dust. He hadn't touched a chisel in days. The air grew thick. He felt dizzy, the room spinning. Somewhere in the darkness, he heard a low, distant laugh, smooth and familiar. Mosey's voice. "Keep carving, Kweku. Gold is never enough, is it?" He looked around wildly, but there was no one there, only the echo of his own breath and the glitter of his trophies. Scene 6. The Shadow of Success. By dawn, Kweku sat in his grand living room, surrounded by wealth he could no longer feel. The gold walls glimmered in the sunlight, but his eyes were empty. He touched one of the coins he'd earned. It felt cold. For the first time, he noticed something engraved on it, the same strange symbol from the coin Mosey gave him long ago. He turned it over, and the metal seemed to pulse faintly, like a heartbeat. A chill ran through him. Kweku whispered to himself, "Maybe this isn't success. Maybe it's something else." The words hung heavy in the air. The golden room felt smaller now, colder, as if the light itself was beginning to fade. Kweku's nights had grown longer. He no longer rested. He worked in his sleep. In his dreams, he stood in a dark workshop that stretched endlessly into shadow. His hands carved non-stop, faster than he could think, his fingers raw and bleeding. The carvings surrounded him, hundreds of statues, each whispering his name. "Kweku, Kweku, you gave us life, now give us yours." He would scream himself awake, trembling, drenched in sweat, his palms aching. When he turned on the light, he found tiny wood shavings on his bed, the same kind that came from mahogany, his favorite wood. His stomach twisted. He hadn't touched a chisel in weeks. Something was terribly wrong. Scene 2. The living sculptures, as the days passed, the nightmares grew stronger. But what terrified Kweku most were the mornings. He began to find new sculptures in his mansion, pieces he didn't remember carving. One morning, he discovered a small wooden mask on his desk. Its eyes were deep and hollow, and yet, when he looked at it, it looked back. He dropped it in shock. The mask rolled across the floor and stopped upright, still staring at him. His breath caught. He whispered, "No, this can't be real." But it was. The servants began quitting one by one, saying they heard whispers in the halls at night, wooden footsteps echoing where no one walked. His mother refused to visit any more. "Your home is full of spirits," she said, her voice trembling, "and they are not our ancestors." Kweku laughed, but the sound was hollow. Inside, he felt his sanity slipping like sand through his fingers. Scene 3. The priest's warning. One afternoon, an old friend came to see him. Father Osi, a local priest from his village. When Osi entered the mansion, he stopped abruptly, his face pale. "You've brought darkness into your home, Kweku," he said softly. "I can feel it breathing here." Kweku forced a smile. "You sound like my mother." But the priest's eyes were serious. He looked around, staring at one of the new carvings, a statue of a man chained in gold. "This is no art," Osei said firmly. "You've made a pact. You sold something precious, your dreams, and now your soul works while your body sleeps." Kweku's chest tightened. "That's ridiculous, is it?" the priest asked quietly. "Look at your hands." Kweku looked down. His palms were blistered, small cuts forming where none had been before. He stepped back in disbelief. "You think I'm cursed?" he whispered. "I think you've bound yourself to a spirit who feeds on greed," the priest replied. "You must break the bond before it consumes you." But Kweku turned away, anger burning in his chest. "You're all the same. You see evil in everything you don't understand. I worked for my success. I earned this." Father Osei shook his head sadly. "You worked, yes, but not here." Then he left, his final words echoing like a prophecy. Gold bought from the shadows always demands payment. Scene 4. The shadow of Mosey that night. The air in the mansion felt heavy, thick like smoke. Kweku sat in his living room, unable to sleep. The golden walls reflected his face from every angle, 100 versions of himself staring back. And then he saw it. In the reflection behind him, a tall, dark silhouette standing just beyond the doorway. "Mosi?" he whispered. The reflection smiled. But it wasn't Mosey's face anymore. It was his own, only darker, eyes hollow, skin cracked like old wood. He spun around. Nothing there. The lights flickered, and the reflection vanished. His heart pounded as he stumbled backward. The golden watch on his wrist began to glow faintly, then burn. He ripped it off, throwing it across the room. It clattered to the floor, still ticking. From the shadows, a voice whispered, "Gold shines brightest in darkness." Kweku froze. The voice was unmistakable. Smooth, familiar, and cruel. Mosey's laughter echoed from every corner of the house, bouncing off the walls until it filled the air like thunder. "Keep sleeping, dreamer. You'll soon understand what you bought." Scene 5. The beginning of the end. Kweku collapsed to his knees, shaking. His head throbbed as the whispering grew louder. Hundreds of voices chanting his name. He stumbled toward his workshop, desperate for silence. But when he opened the door, his breath stopped. Inside stood dozens of his sculptures, all with his face, each one smiling, and in the center of the room, a new statue waited, unfinished, but unmistakable. It was him, life-sized. The same gold chain he'd once worn was now carved around the statue's neck. He reached out, trembling. His fingers brushed the wood, and he felt warm skin. He screamed, stumbling backward. The statue's eyes opened. "Keep carving," it whispered in his voice. The room spun. The world darkened. And as his consciousness faded, he saw one final thing: Mosey's shadow, stepping from behind the statue, smiling in triumph. Silence. When Kweku's eyes fluttered open, he felt the cold before he saw the darkness. His body was heavy, his wrists ached. He tried to move, and heard the sound of metal scraping against stone. Chains. His breath quickened. He blinked hard, trying to focus. The world around him shimmered in shades of gold. He wasn't in his mansion anymore. He was in a vast golden chamber. Walls carved with the same patterns from his dreams. Each engraving moved, whispering faintly as if alive. He struggled to stand, the chains pulling tight around his arms and ankles. They weren't made of steel. They were made of gold. The realization twisted his gut. The same thing he had chased, adored, and worshipped now bound him. He screamed. The sound echoed endlessly, bouncing back at him from the shining walls. "Hello?" he called. "Is anyone there?" Only silence answered, until a voice rose from behind him. "You're awake at last, dreamer." Scene 2. The Spirit of Greed. From the shadows, Mosi stepped forward. But he was no longer the man Kweku once knew. His skin shimmered like molten gold, his eyes black and endless. His smile was too wide, too calm. "Mosi?" Kweku whispered. The figure chuckled softly. "Mosi was a name you gave me, but I've had many. In your ancestors' tongue, I was called Abansum, the one who buys souls for dreams." Kweku's heart pounded. He yanked against his chains, desperate. "What do you want from me?" "Nothing more than what you offered." "You wanted gold." "And I wanted your dreams." The chamber trembled. Faces began to emerge from the walls, distorted, screaming, trapped within the golden surface. Some were laughing, others weeping. Kweku stumbled back in horror. "Who are they?" "Those who came before you," the spirit said. "Men who built their empires from greed. Men who traded creation for comfort. They shine forever, but never live again." He walked closer, eyes burning. "You should be proud." "You were one of my finest," Kweku spat. "You tricked me." "No," the spirit whispered, smiling. "You bargained. You knew what you wanted. You just never asked what it would cost." The gold beneath Kweku's feet began to ripple like liquid. His reflection stared back. Only this time, the reflection smiled even as he cried. Scene 3. The memory of the deal, the spirit raised his hand, and the room filled with images. Scenes from Kweku's past. He saw himself younger, desperate, struggling, carving late into the night, his hands shaking from hunger, his heart heavy from failure. He saw the night he met Mosi for the first time. The stranger with the golden ring, who had whispered, "I can make your dreams real, for a price." He saw himself nodding eagerly, signing the invisible pact, his signature written in shadow and breath. The spirit's voice echoed through the memory. "I didn't steal your dreams, Kweku. You gave them to me." The images faded, leaving Kweku trembling. "No, I didn't know what I was giving up." "You did," Abansum replied. "You just didn't care." Scene 4. The weight of gold Kweku's body began to feel heavier. The golden chains tightened, pulling him toward the ground. He gasped for breath, clawing at them. They felt alive, wrapping tighter around his chest and throat. The spirit circled him like a vulture. "Do you feel it? The weight of every dream you abandoned for wealth?" Each time the spirit spoke, the walls glowed brighter, until Kweku's eyes burned. He screamed, "Take the gold! Take everything! Just let me go!" Abansum smiled. The kind of smile that belongs to no living thing. You misunderstand, dreamer. The gold was never mine to take. It was yours to carry. And with that, the chains around his wrists turned molten, searing his skin. His scream filled the chamber. Then he saw something. A faint light glowing deep within his chest. His dreams. They weren't gone, just buried, suffocated beneath greed. He closed his eyes, shaking, whispering through the pain. My art. My purpose? It was never for gold. For the first time, the chains trembled. Scene 5, the last carving. In a surge of desperate strength, Kweku reached for a small chisel lying nearby. One made of light, pure and untainted, a Bonsam hissed, the room shaking. "Don't you dare touch that!" But Kweku ignored him. He lifted the chisel and pressed it to his own chest, carving a symbol over his heart. The same one he used to mark every sculpture. Blood and gold mixed as he whispered, "I reclaim my dreams," the spirit screamed. A sound that shattered the chamber walls. Golden cracks spread in every direction. The faces in the walls began to fade, freed from their prison. The light from Kweku's chest grew blinding, consuming everything. A Bonsam roared, his form twisting into shadow. "You can't destroy me! I live in every heart that covets gold." Kweku smiled weakly through tears. "Then I'll carve something stronger than greed." He drove the chisel into the ground. The world exploded in light. Scene 6. The ashes of gold. When the light faded, the golden chamber was gone. Kweku woke on the floor of his workshop. Dawn sunlight filtering through broken windows. The mansion around him was in ruins. The gold melted into dull, cracked dust. He looked down. His hands were burnt, scarred, but free. In front of him sat his final sculpture, a figure carved in dark wood, kneeling with broken chains. Its face was his own, but peaceful. He exhaled shakily. "It's over." But as he turned away, a faint glimmer of gold shimmered in the sculpture's eyes, a quiet reminder that greed never truly dies. The world was still. Kweku sat in the ruins of his once grand mansion. The gold walls had turned gray, the floors cracked with the echoes of his downfall. Outside, the wind carried whispers, faint and mournful, like a funeral song. He stared at his trembling hands. They were blistered, burned, scarred from the fire that had consumed his golden prison. The once great sculptor, the man the world had called the Hand of the Gods, now sat among ashes, alone. But inside him, for the first time in years, there was silence. Not emptiness, silence. Peaceful, haunting silence. He looked around at the shattered remains of his art, pieces of soulless sculptures, faces that no longer meant anything to him. Tears welled up in his eyes. "I had everything," he whispered to himself, and lost everything that mattered. Then, slowly, his gaze fell on a single block of dark wood lying near the door. Untouched, unburned. He reached for it, his fingers brushing the surface. It was the same kind of wood he used long ago, before the gold, before the mansion, before the deal. A faint smile crossed his face. "One last carving," he murmured. "For them." Scene 2. The memory that guides the hand. Kweku dragged the wood to the center of the room. His hands shook as he picked up his old chisel. Rusted, worn, but still true. He took a deep breath, remembering the sound of his mother's laughter, the way his little sister used to hum as she played by his side. Memories filled the empty space around him, giving warmth to the cold air. He began to carve. Every strike of the chisel was slow, deliberate. not driven by ambition this time, but love. Sweat mixed with tears as the shape began to take form. Two figures standing close together. His mother, smiling softly, and his sister, her hand reaching toward him. The faces came alive under his touch, not in grandeur, but in truth. They were imperfect. Real. "I'm sorry," he whispered to the figures as he carved. "I forgot why I began. I forgot who I was." Outside, thunder rumbled. The air grew heavy. Shadows began to gather around him. The last remnants of Abansum's power, circling like vultures. But Kweku kept carving. He wouldn't stop now. Scene 3, The Fury of the Spirit. The light in the room flickered, and then the air split open with a roar. Abansum appeared, his golden form cracked and furious, smoke pouring from his eyes. His voice shook the ground. "You think you can defy me? You belong to me, dreamer." Kweku didn't flinch. His hands moved faster, carving with desperate strength. Splinters flew, blood from his palms staining the wood. "I belong to my art," Kweku said softly. "Not to gold," Abansum snarled. "You owe me. You still owe the masterpiece that binds your soul to mine." The spirit's claws reached out, gripping the half-finished statue. Flames erupted, gold liquid spilling from its surface, but Kweku held on tight. "Then I'll pay the debt in truth." Scene 4, The Heart of the Statue. Kweku's hands trembled violently. The statue was almost complete. His mother's eyes carved with care, his sister's smile tender and bright. At the center of their joined hands was a small, hollow space, the heart of the piece. Kweku leaned forward and whispered into it, voice breaking. "Forgive me." He dipped his fingers into his own blood and pressed them into the hollow. The statue glowed faintly, pulsing with red light. Abansum screamed, the sound piercing like thunder. "Stop! You'll destroy everything!" Kweku turned to him, eyes wet but fearless. "Then let everything burn." He raised the chisel high and drove it straight into the statue's heart. Scene 5. The Fire of Redemption. The Maihidri. Room exploded in light. Flames burst from the carving, gold melting into streams of fire that circled the walls. Abansum's scream became distant, fading into the roar of the inferno. Kweku felt the chains of gold inside him snap one by one, each release sending waves of pain through his body. But with every break, he felt lighter, freer. The statues, the mansion, the gold, all began to crumble into ash. Through the chaos, Kweku could see the faces of the trapped souls, now free, smiling as they vanished into light. He whispered, "Thank you." And then, everything went white. Scene 6. The Return. When the world came back, Kweku lay on the dusty floor of his old village workshop. The morning sun streamed through the window, soft and warm. His hands were bleeding, his clothes torn, but his heart felt whole. Beside him lay the statue, the same one from his dream, of his mother and sister smiling. Its heart was broken open, but it still radiated peace. A soft voice called from the doorway. "Kweku?" It was his sister, older now, eyes wide with tears. Their mother stood behind her, trembling. They rushed to him, holding him up as he weakly smiled. "I'm home," he whispered. Scene 7. The Silent Reward. Days later, Kweku sat outside the workshop, watching the sunset. The golden light painted the sky, but for the first time, it didn't tempt him. It only reminded him of what he had survived. He picked up a small piece of wood and began to carve. Not for fame, not for gold, but simply because it felt right. Each stroke was steady, calm, alive. He smiled faintly to himself. Gold fades, he murmured, but the soul endures. The camera lingers on the broken statue inside, the one with his mother and sister. Even in its brokenness, it is beautiful. The morning breeze drifted softly through the village, carrying the scent of earth and the faint hum of distant drums. Kweku walked down the familiar path barefoot, each step stirring the dust he once swore he'd leave behind. His clothes were simple now, his hair longer, his hands scarred. But his eyes held peace. Children ran past him, laughing. Some stopped and whispered, "That's him, the man who went to the city." He smiled kindly, nodding without a word. When he reached the small wooden hut that once served as his workshop, he paused. The walls were cracked, the roof half collapsed, but inside, the scent of sawdust still lingered. He stepped in, ran his fingers across the old workbench, and closed his eyes. "I've come home," he whispered. For a long moment, he simply stood there, listening. The silence no longer frightened him. It felt like a companion. Scene 2. The first carving again. That evening, as the sun dipped behind the palm trees, Kweku gathered the children of the village around him. They sat in a circle, eyes bright with curiosity. In front of them lay a piece of rough wood. Nothing special, just a piece of a fallen tree. Kweku picked up his chisel. "Do you know why we carve?" he asked. A small boy raised his hand eagerly. "To make something beautiful." Kweku smiled. "Yes, but beauty alone is not enough. We carve to remember. We carve to speak when words cannot." He began to shape the wood slowly, his movements calm, almost sacred. The children leaned in, watching as the rough block began to reveal a face. Gentle, kind, smiling. "When I was your age," Kweku continued softly, "I wanted to carve for gold. I thought gold would change my life. But gold doesn't feed the spirit. It only feeds hunger." The children listened in silence. The only sound was the rhythm of his chisel, steady as a heartbeat. "If your hands forget your heart," he said, "then your art will lose its soul." When he finished, the carving was simple. A small bird, wings outstretched, eyes lifted to the sky. He placed it in the hands of one of the children. "Fly free," he said. Scene 3. The return of the river days turned into weeks. Kweku rebuilt the workshop with the help of the villagers. He no longer made grand sculptures. No marble, no gold, no fine polish. His carvings were humble but alive. People began to come from nearby villages to see them, not to buy, but to feel. Each piece carried warmth, peace, and a strange calm that settled the heart. One afternoon, Kweku went to the riverbank, the same place he used to sit as a boy, dreaming of fame. The water shimmered in the sunlight, golden and clear. He bent down, cupping a handful, and saw his reflection ripple in the stream. For a moment, he thought he saw someone standing beside him, tall, cloaked in black. Mosey. The spirit's reflection smiled faintly, not cruelly this time, but almost proud. "You kept your word, dreamer," the reflection whispered. "You carved your truth." Kweku didn't speak. He simply nodded, letting the reflection fade with the moving water. As it disappeared, a small gold coin rolled onto the sand near his foot. He picked it up, stared at it for a long moment, then threw it into the river. The ripples spread wide, catching the sunlight until the water looked like it was made of pure gold. Scene 4. The visit. That evening, as the sky burned orange, Kweku's mother and sister visited him at the workshop. Amma, now a grown woman, placed a hand on his shoulder. "You look different," she said softly. "Peaceful," he smiled. "Peace doesn't come from gold." "Amma." It comes from letting go. His mother, her eyes filled with quiet pride, looked around the small shop. "You have nothing left of your riches," she said. Kweku nodded. "And yet, I have everything I ever needed." They sat together under the stars that night, sharing roasted maize and laughter. No mansion, no servants, no luxury. Just family. And for the first time, the night didn't feel empty. It felt full. Scene 5. The legacy years passed. The workshop became a place of learning, where children and travelers came to hear Kweku's stories and learn his craft. He taught them to carve from the heart, to listen to the wood, to honor the spirit within it. His hands grew weaker with age, but his voice remained strong. Sometimes, when he carved, he would glance at the doorway, half expecting to see Mosey's tall shadow there, but it never came again. Instead, he saw light, sunlight streaming in, catching the dust in the air like tiny golden sparks, and he would smile. Scene 6. The final lesson. One quiet morning, years later, an old Kweku sat beneath the great baobab tree near his workshop. A group of children surrounded him, as always. One asked, "Master Kweku, will you ever carve again?" He chuckled, eyes warm. "My hands are too tired now, but maybe the world has enough of my carvings. What it needs are yours." He reached into his satchel and pulled out the same chisel he had used since his youth. Worn, but still sharp. He handed it to a small boy. "Take this. Carve something from your heart. Don't carve for gold. Carve for truth." The boy took it reverently. Kweku leaned back, closing his eyes as the wind rustled through the trees. The sound was soft, like whispers, familiar whispers. He smiled faintly. "You see, my children," he murmured, "dreams are not meant to be sold. They're meant to be shared." And with that, the old sculptor's breathing slowed. His head rested gently against the trunk of the baobab, the wind wrapping around him like an embrace. Scene 7. The echo of his words. Years later, travelers who passed through the village would stop at the workshop. There, they would find young carvers working, laughing, teaching, their art alive with heart and spirit. On the wall hung a small carving, an old man smiling, holding a bird with open wings. Below it, etched into the wood, were the words Kweku once spoke. "In chasing gold, I lost my soul. In carving truth, I found it again." The camera lingers on the carving as the sunlight filters through the window. Dust motes dance in the air, tiny, glowing flecks of gold. And somewhere, faintly, the sound of a chisel echoes, not of greed, but of creation.